They tried to bury me while I was still breathing. My own daughter, blood of my blood, stood in a courtroom and called me incompetent. Said I was too old, too confused to hold my own name, and her husband. He smiled while they wrote the papers to steal the life I built. If you're hearing this, then you already know this isn't just a story, it's a warning. My name is Jerome Ellison, and I'm about to tell you how I turned a betrayal into justice. Before we begin, if you're watching this, like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where were you when you first heard about my revenge? Because I want to know how far the truth has traveled. Now sit down. Let me tell you how a father fights back, not with fists, not with fury, but with the law and a heart that refused to break. The first thing I heard when I walked into that courtroom was my daughter's laugh, short, sharp, and mean. The kind of laugh that slices right through a man's chest. Nia was sitting beside her husband Brandon, both dressed like they'd come from a magazine spread about success and power. I stood there in my old denim shirt, my farm boots leaving dust on that polished marble floor, holding my hat in both hands like a man coming to beg for mercy. Brandon leaned in close to her and whispered something. She covered her mouth, but I still saw the smile. I knew that smile. It was the same one she used to wear when she lied about sneaking out as a teenager, only colder now, meaner. I looked at her and thought, Lord, what have I done wrong with this child? The bailiff told me to sit. I walked past rows of people, strangers, lawyers, clerks, all giving me that look. City folks give a man who smells of soil and wind. I sat on the defendant's bench. My hands were shaking a little, but not from fear. They've been shaking like that for years. A small tremor that never hurt anyone but made people whisper. Signs of age, they'd say. Could be dementia. That rumor was part of the plan, and I knew exactly whose plan it was. Across the aisle, Nia's lawyer, some young man in a $1,000 suit, was shuffling papers, confident, rehearsed. He didn't know who I was. None of them did. To them, I was just an old fool whose mind was fading. A burden they were about to wrap in legal language and bury under the title incompetent. Then the door behind the bench opened and Judge Rafael Mendez walked in. He looked older than I remembered, but his walk still carried that cautious dignity I taught him back when he was a clerk under me 30 years ago. He adjusted his robe, sat down, and started reading from the docket. This is the matter of Nia Ellison Hart versus Jerome Ellison, he said. His tone was flat, procedural. He hadn't looked up yet. My daughter sat straighter. Her lawyer nodded. Brandon leaned back, smiling like he already owned my soul. The petition, Mendez continued, seeks a temporary conservatorship over the respondent's estate, citing concerns of mental incapacity and inability to manage financial matters following the recent inheritance of one Caleb Ellison. At my brother's name, something clenched in my chest. Caleb, my only brother, my blood. He'd been gone 3 months and I hadn't even had the strength to cry right. The judge kept reading. The petition is supported by medical observations of tremor and social withdrawal and affidavits describing cognitive confusion. He turned a page. His voice hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he looked up, and in that single second, everything changed. Our eyes met. His lips parted. The color drained from his face. His hand trembled not from nerves, but from recognition. He whispered, "My God." The courtroom went still. I could hear the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Nia frowned, confused. Brandon shifted in his chair. Judge Mendez leaned forward, his voice breaking the silence. "Is that you, Judge Ellison?" I didn't answer right away. I set my hat down beside me, rose slowly, and let my spine straighten the way it used to when I walked into a courtroom that was mine. My boots stopped creaking. My shoulders squared. "Yes, Raphael," I said, calm and low. "It's me. You could have heard a pin drop." The bailiff froze. The lawyer blinked like his brain had jammed. Even Nia, my own daughter, stared at me as if she was seeing a ghost she didn't believe in. Judge Mendez stood up. His chair rolled backward and hit the wall with a thud. "Your Honor," he said, and then caught himself because that title didn't belong to me anymore, not officially. But once you've worn the robe, it never quite leaves you. I didn't realize," he stammered. "The documents didn't mention." "No," I said. They wouldn't. That was deliberate. I looked straight at Nia. She couldn't hold my gaze.
Her lips trembled, but she stayed quiet. Brandon's jaw was locked. The young lawyer started flipping through his notes like the truth might have fallen between the pages. For a moment the silence felt holy. Then Mendez gathered himself, sat back down, and spoke in a tone heavy with respect and unease. Court will recess for 10 minutes. The gavel hit the block like a gunshot. But nobody moved. Not me, not her, not the man who married her. That's how it began the day my own daughter tried to strip me of my dignity. You see, people talk about betrayal like it's a single act, a knife in the back, a signature on a paper, a lie. But betrayal's slower than that. It's a leak that starts with love and ends with silence. You don't notice the hole until your whole heart's drained out. 3 months before that day, I was on my porch feeding the chickens when Nia called. I hadn't heard her voice in weeks. She said, calm as a weather report, Pop Uncle Caleb passed. I froze right there on the steps. Caleb, my brother, since the beginning of every memory I had gone. Just like that. She didn't pause to let me breathe. His attorney says there are estate matters. You'll need to come to the city to sign some documents. Not a word about grief, not a word about love, just estate matters. I told her I'd come. Drove 4 hours to Memphis in my old pickup. Brandon met me at the door, slick as ever, holding a drink, calling me sir like I was a stranger. The house smelled of money. Too clean, too cold. Nia came down the stairs in a gray suit, her phone still in her hand. She gave me a quick hug, polite, distant, and said, sit, Pop. We have a lot to go over. Papers everywhere, legal pads, spreadsheets. She talked about trusts and liquid assets, not about her uncle's life. Caleb left everything to you, she said, her tone flat, annoyed. But Pop, you can't manage that kind of portfolio anymore. You've been out of the system for years. You barely use email. Brandon cut in. We can help, sir. Nia's an attorney. I've got real estate experience. We'll set up a management plan. Safer that way. I looked at them both, my daughter and the man she chose. They were speaking like I was already half gone, a piece of land waiting to be signed over. Something in me stirred, old and stubborn. I'll think on it, I said. She smiled, thin, professional. Don't think too long. Probate deadlines move fast. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there in their guest room, the city lights leaking through the blinds. Around midnight, I heard voices downstairs. I crept down barefoot the way you do when you already know the truth, but still hope you're wrong. Brandon's voice. He's stubborn, but we'll get the petition through. With his tremor, isolation, the age factor, we'll have a conservatorship order signed before he knows it. Nia's voice. I don't like lying to him. You like losing $800,000, Brandon hissed. Trust me, baby. It's not lying. It's protecting him. There it was. My daughter, the child I'd taught to pray before meals, to say thank you, and please, sitting in the dark, plotting to take everything her uncle left me. I remember gripping that staircase railing, my knuckles white. I didn't say a word. I turned, went back upstairs, and waited for dawn. By sunrise, I'd packed my bag. I left without breakfast, without goodbyes. Just a note on the kitchen table, I'll see you in court if I have to. And now, 3 months later, here I was. Standing under those same courthouse lights I'd stood under for 35 years, but on the wrong side of the bench. To them, I was the old man who forgot who he used to be. But I hadn't forgotten a damn thing. Not the law, not the system, not what it takes to win when everyone thinks you're already beaten. And as Judge Mendez walked back in gavel ready, my heart settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Steady, deliberate, unafraid. They thought they were about to bury me, but I'd already dug their grave. 3 months before that courtroom day, before the silence, before the betrayal had a name, my phone rang just after sunset. I was on my porch in Tennessee watching the fireflies blink over the soybean fields when Nia's number flashed on the screen. I remember thinking it was strange she rarely called unless it was Christmas or my birthday. I wiped the dirt from my hands and answered. Her voice was steady, clipped, all business. Pop, she said. Uncle Caleb passed this morning. The world didn't spin or shake. It just went still. Caleb Ellison,
My older brother, my only brother. The man who taught me how to shave, how to fish, how to stand up straight even when life hit you in the gut. Gone. How I asked. Heart failure, she said like she was reading the weather. It was peaceful. His attorney contacted me this afternoon. We need to handle his estate. You should come to Memphis this weekend. No pause. No, I'm sorry. No, are you okay? Just estate. Estate, I repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. Yes, she said, her voice tightening as if my grief were an inconvenience. There are some legal documents. You're the beneficiary, Pop, but you'll need to sign management papers before probate starts. I didn't say much after that. I just hung up, sat back on that porch swing, and let the crickets fill the quiet. The old boards creaked under me, as if the house itself sighed. Caleb was gone, and I hadn't even seen him in months. I'd meant to call him last Easter. Life got in the way, I told myself. But guilt doesn't take excuses, it just settles in your chest and stays there. That night I packed a small bag, threw it in the truck, and drove the 4 hours north to Memphis. The closer I got to the city, the heavier my stomach felt. Nia's neighborhood was the kind of place where every lawn looked cloned and every house pretended to be happier than the one next to it.
She and Brandon lived in a 2-story brick home with glass walls, automatic lights, and no soul.
I parked in the driveway beside Brandon's new Escalade and sat there for a moment watching my reflection in the windshield, a 67-year-old man in work clothes and tired eyes. When Brandon opened the door, he didn't hug me. He just nodded, holding a tumbler of bourbon, his tie loose like he'd just come from conquering something. Sir, he said, not Pop, not Dad, just sir, like I was a stranger selling something he didn't want to buy. Inside, Nia was at the kitchen island surrounded by papers, her phone pressed between her shoulder and ear. She ended the call the moment she saw me, plastering on a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Pop, she said, walking over. You made good time. I drove slow, I said, didn't want to hit any raccoons. She didn't laugh, just pointed at a chair. Sit, we've got a lot to cover. I sat. She spread out documents like she was presenting a case to a jury, which in a way she was. This is Uncle Caleb's estate, she began, roughly $1.1 million, the house in Collierville, municipal bonds, some farmland, and a pour-over trust that hasn't been activated yet. His lawyer says it's all in your name. I blinked. He left everything to me. Yes, she said flatly, but that's not the issue. She exchanged a quick look with Brandon. He leaned against the counter watching me, the way a vulture watches roadkill patient certain. Pop, she continued, you live alone. You don't have anyone checking in on you. You don't even keep a computer. Managing something like this requires financial oversight. Someone who understands investments, taxes, deadlines. Someone like you, I said. Her smile tightened. Well, yes, I can help. We just need to sign a durable power of attorney so I can handle things on your behalf. That phrase, on your behalf, rang in my ears like a bad verdict. I'd heard too many like it in my years as a judge, harmless words wrapped around hidden knives. I leaned back. I think I'll take my time before signing anything. Brandon's face shifted, not anger, but irritation. The kind rich men get when their meal takes too long. Mr. Ellison, he said, I understand hesitation, but this is standard. You've been out of the system a while. It's just precautionary. Precaution, I said quietly, for whom neither of them answered. That night, I stayed in their guest room, neat, cold, with framed certificates on the walls instead of photographs. I couldn't sleep. Something in that house felt wrong, like a song played slightly off-key. Around midnight, I got up to get some water. That's when I heard the voices. They were downstairs, faint but clear enough. Nia, Brandon, and another man, deeper voice, professional tone. I'm telling you, the stranger said, if we present this right, it's open and shut. He's isolated, lives alone. No recent medical checkups. We can claim early cognitive decline, Brandon replied. We can't just lie, Victor. Lie? The man laughed. You're not lying. You're protecting family wealth. Judges eat this stuff up, lonely old man in denial, daughter, just trying to help. My heartbeat slowed, not from calm, but from something older that still focused rhythm I used to get in court when a witness finally slipped. Nia's voice came next. Softer, hesitant. I don't want to hurt him, Victor. He's my father. The man's voice. Victor's turned sharp. Then don't think of it as hurting. Think of it as handling things. The petition will just give you temporary control. Once the conservatorship's granted, you can transition the trust and manage it legally. No backlash. Brandon exhaled. And the paperwork. It's already in motion, Victor said. I could almost hear the smirk in his voice. Ex parte Monday. The judge won't even need him present. Ex parte Monday. The words hit like a hammer, a secret court motion one-sided done before I'd even be notified. By the time I got the letter, it'd already be law. I stood frozen in the hallway, the dark swallowing me whole. My daughter was about to declare me unfit to live my own life, to take control of everything I'd worked for, everything my brother trusted me with. And she was doing it in the name of love. I crept back upstairs, every step slow, careful. When I reached the room, I sat on the edge of the bed, hands clenched tight, staring at the moonlight cutting across the floorboards. My heart wasn't racing. It was too tired for that. It just thudded, steady, heavy, cold. People say betrayal feels like fire. They're wrong. It feels like ice. It freezes you first so you can't scream. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I packed my bag, left a note that said simply, "Don't contact me. Not until you remember who raised you." Then I drove south toward my home by the river, past miles of gray asphalt and empty billboards. The farther I got from that house, the more I remembered who I was. Not the old man they thought I'd become, but the judge who'd once looked criminals in the eye and told them truth still meant something. Somewhere between the city limits and the first bend of the Wolf River, I made a promise. If they wanted a courtroom fight, I'd give them one. And when it was over, my daughter would know exactly who her father was. When I got back home that morning, the air by the Wolf River was thick with mist. The fields still carried that blue-gray hue that comes just before sunrise when the world is quiet enough to hear yourself think. My old hound Chester barked once, then recognized my truck and trotted up the porch steps, tail low. He always knew when something was wrong. Dogs have that gift. I stepped inside my little house and stood there for a while, listening to the silence. The city still clung to me, the smell of perfume, the echo of polished shoes, the sound of my daughter's voice calling me incompetent behind closed doors. Out here, though, I could breathe again. The first thing I did was pour coffee, not because I needed it, but because it gave my hands something to do besides shake. I sat at the small kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from the mug. For the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own life. After a while, I pushed back my chair and went into the bedroom. There, under the bed, was a wooden box I hadn't opened since the day I retired. Dust had gathered thick across its surface. I pulled it out slowly and set it on the bedspread. The latch clicked open with a sound that felt almost ceremonial. Inside were the pieces of a life I'd once lived. My judge's ID badge, a few black and white photographs, the silver pen my wife gave me when I was appointed to the bench, and stacks of old papers, draft rulings, handwritten notes, transcripts with my scribbles in the margins. And on top of it all, a letter in Caleb's handwriting. It was dated 2 years before his death. The envelope was yellowed, the ink faded, but the moment I saw his script, bold, heavy, slanted, I felt that old brotherly ache again. I unfolded the letter with hands that trembled for reasons that had nothing to do with age. "Brother," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I've gone ahead of you. I know how you are. You'll blame yourself for not visiting enough, for not calling. Don't. We had our time, and it was good. What I want you to remember is simple. Don't let anybody make you small. You spent your life standing tall for others. Don't bow now, not even to blood." I sat there a long while reading those words over and over. Don't let anybody make you small. That's what Nia and her husband were trying to do. They wanted to shrink me down to a paper version of myself, an old signature to be manipulated, an asset to be managed. But Caleb had seen this coming. Maybe not the details, but the shape of it. He always saw further than I did. I reached for the phone on my nightstand. There was only one person I could call. When she picked up, her voice was raspy, still heavy with sleep. "This is Odette." "Odette Price," I said, and even saying her name felt like opening an old case file. "It's Rome." There was a pause, then a sharp inhale.
"Lord Judge Ellison, I thought you were done with us courthouse folks for good." "So did I said quietly. "But it seems the law's not done with me. Tell me what's happened." I told her everything. Caleb's death, Nia's call, the dinner, the overheard conversation. Every word of it. I could almost hear Odette pacing on the other end of the line, her slippers whispering against the hardwood floor. When I finished, she didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, "You were right to call me. I've got some things you might need." 2 hours later, I heard her old Buick pulling up the gravel drive. I met her on the porch. Time had curved her back a little, but her eyes, those sharp, hawk-like eyes that used to catch typos in murder verdicts, were still fierce. "Well," she said, climbing the steps, "you really did try to disappear, didn't you? No one's seen you at the courthouse in years." "I had my reasons." "I bet you did." She patted the large tote bag hanging from her shoulder. "And now I've got mine." We went inside and she placed the bag on the kitchen table. Out came manila folders, each labeled in her careful handwriting. "You remember when you told me to make backup copies of everything important before you retired? I did what you asked." Inside those folders were letters, thank yous from lawyers, citizens, even a few inmates whose cases I'd reviewed with compassion instead of contempt. There were awards, commendations, and clippings from newspapers long defunct. She laid them out like pieces on a chessboard. "These," she said, tapping the pile, "prove you're not some confused hermit. They prove you were a man of reason and integrity." That still counts for something. I smiled. "You were always better prepared than I deserved. And you were always too damn modest for your own good," she said, reaching into the bag again. "There's more. You'll like this one." She pulled out a thin, leather-bound folder. Inside were old handwritten notes and rulings cases from early in my career. I recognized the handwriting on the margin notes. "R. Mendez. Your former intern Odette," said with a knowing smile. "Used to idolize you. I found his old clerkship evaluations in the archives. You gave him top marks. He used to call you his moral compass." "Guess who's sitting on the Shelby County bench now, Mendez," I said softly, remembering the young man who once shadowed me through those long nights in chambers. "Life's got a funny sense of timing." "Sure does," she said, leaning back in her chair. For a few minutes we didn't speak. The river hummed outside. I could almost feel Caleb there with us, smiling that half-crooked smile of his. Then Odette sighed. "There's one more thing." Her tone changed and the air thickened. "Last week," she said, "I got a call from a young lawyer, someone from your daughter's firm. Said they were doing a background check on you, wanted access to your old personnel files and your medical evaluations from before you retired." My stomach turned. Medical evaluations, yeah. The ones about your tremor, your blood pressure. They wanted anything that might indicate cognitive decline. Those were their words. I stared at her, unable to speak for a moment. "Did you give it to them?" "Hell no," she said. "Told them everything was sealed and they'd need a court order. But Rome, that call, it wasn't casual. They were ready. And I think they already filed something." She opened another folder and slid a document toward me. "I pulled this from the county docket system this morning. They filed an ex parte petition for temporary conservatorship." I picked it up, scanning the lines. There it was, plain as day, my name in bold letters, Jerome Ellison, listed as the respondent. My daughter's name right above it, petitioner. I felt something cold crawl up the back of my neck. "When's the hearing?" I asked. Odette checked her notes. "Status hearing. Wednesday, 10 a.m. I looked at the clock. It was Sunday afternoon. "We've got 72 hours, she said quietly. The air between us went still. The only sound was the tick of the wall clock and the faint ripple of the river outside. 72 hours to stop my own daughter from taking my life apart.
72 hours to remind everyone, including myself, exactly who I was. Sleep didn't come easy after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the word respondent stamped over my name in black ink, as if the world had already decided who I was. So before the sun even rose, I sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, the same kind I used back in the courthouse, and started writing. Not a eulogy, a plan, if they wanted to drag me into court. They weren't getting some confused old man mumbling about the good old days. They were going to face Judge Jerome Ellison, retired, yes, but not buried. At the top of the page, I wrote 3 words in capital letters: truth is evidence. Then I began listing everything I needed. First, Odette, sharp as a tack and stubborn enough to bite through iron. She'd testify to my competence to every hour I spent reviewing cases until my eyes blurred even after the tremor started. She'd say what I couldn't, that my hands may shake, but my mind never has. Second, Pearl Watkins, my next-door neighbor, 73 years old, retired nurse. The woman knows the pattern of my mornings better than I do. She's seen me drive to town every Friday, seen me fix her porch light when it went out, seen me balance my checkbook right there on the porch swing with my reading glasses low on my nose. Nobody could twist that into dementia, not on my watch. Third, Dr. Annika Rhodes, neurologist out of Memphis General. She diagnosed my tremor years ago. Essential tremor, she called it. Benign, embarrassing sometimes, but harmless. I knew she'd remember me. I sent her a Christmas card every year with a picture of my chickens. She'd tell the court I wasn't losing my mind, just my steadiness. Fourth, Mason Lee, my banker over at the local credit union. Mason's in his 40s, smart, practical, no nonsense. He's seen me deposit checks, pay property taxes, move funds between accounts, all without a hitch. His statement alone could bury the incapacity claim. And finally, a list of 10 letters from my former colleagues, judges, clerks, lawyers, who still remembered me not as some relic, but as a man who stood upright in crooked times. That was my foundation, my bricks and mortar. Odette came by mid-morning with a second tote bag, thicker this time, stuffed with files and papers she'd printed off county archives. She dropped it on my table and poured herself a mug of my coffee without asking. "Judge," she said, settling in, "I've been doing some digging into your son-in-law, Brandon Hart. I figured you might." "Well, honey," she said, leaning forward, "what I found stinks worse than spoiled catfish." She opened a folder marked River and Ridge LLC. Inside were spreadsheets, wire transfers, a few grainy scans of notarized deeds. Back around 2015, she began, Brandon was tied to a real estate project outside Little Rock, luxury development, half built and half paid for. Company went under. The investors screamed fraud, but the main witness disappeared before the trial. Guess whose signature is on the loan guarantees? She slid a page toward me. There it was, Brandon's name in blue ink, clear as day. "Did he get charged?" I asked. "Nope," she said. "No witness, no case. But guess what? The shell company that owned the land, River and Ridge LLC, got resurrected last year in Tennessee. Guess who's the listed financial consultant? I didn't need to guess." "Brandon Hart," she said, tapping the paper. "And the new filings match up with a trust name, CE Holdings." "CE," I murmured. "Caleb Ellison. Exactly." The air went still. The pieces slid together in my mind like a courtroom puzzle I'd solved 1,000 times before. They weren't just after my inheritance out of greed. They were after access. Brandon needed liquidity. Caleb's estate was their golden ticket to wash old sins clean. Odette looked at me over her glasses. "They're desperate, Rome. That man's neck deep in debt, and your daughter either doesn't know or doesn't want to." I took a slow breath. "We'll find out which soon enough." She nodded, then pulled one last folder from the bottom of her bag, older and thinner than the rest. "I almost forgot this," she said, setting it down gently. "Caleb's attorney sent me a scanned copy of an old addendum he found in the back of the trust documents. Thought you'd want to see it." I opened it. The handwriting was Caleb's again, neat, deliberate, proud. Addendum to the Ellison Family Trust. Should my brother, Jerome Ellison, inherit this estate, 40%, 40% shall, after 18 months of his exclusive control, be transferred to establish a community legal aid fund in his name. The condition for activation is that said beneficiary retains full independent authority during the period stated. Should he be declared legally incapacitated or placed under conservatorship within that time, all assets shall revert to the secondary beneficiaries listed. I read it twice. Then a third time, letting every word sink in. Independent authority for 18 months. If Nia's conservatorship petition succeeded even temporarily, that clause would trigger and the entire trust, all 1.1 million, would bypass her completely. She and Brandon wouldn't get a cent. Caleb had built a safeguard, one final chess move after death. Odette was grinning now, sharp and satisfied. You see what that means, Judge. If they win, they lose. That's why they rushed the ex parte. They're trying to hit before this clause gets reviewed. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in days, I almost smiled. My brother hadn't just trusted me, he'd protected me from beyond the grave. Odette closed the folder and folded her hands. So what's next? I looked out the window at the wide sweep of the river, sunlight glinting off the slow current. Somewhere out there, Caleb's ashes rested beneath a sycamore tree we used to climb as boys. I thought about all the mornings we'd fished side by side, him talking about fairness like it was a religion. What's next, I said, is that we fight them where they think I'm weakest in court. Odette raised an eyebrow. You mean you're representing yourself? Who better? I said, a hint of steel in my voice. No one knows the system like I do, and no one's going to defend my mind better than me. She smiled, that same crooked grin she used to wear when we won a tough case. Then we'd better make it airtight. We will, I said. I looked down at Caleb's letter again, his final words looping in my head. Don't let anybody make you small. Well, brother, I thought not today, not ever again. Because they'd tried to bury me under papers and lies, but I still had my tools. Truth time and 72 hours left to build a wall they couldn't climb. When the phone rang that Thursday evening, I already knew it was coming. I'd been waiting for it the way a soldier waits for the next shot in a battle he can't walk away from. The number flashed across the screen, Nia. Pop, she said, her voice syrup-sweet and steady. How are you feeling? I could hear the false warmth, every syllable wrapped in something rehearsed. I'm fine, I said. What's this about? I was thinking, she said, pausing for effect. We haven't had dinner together in forever. Brandon's been asking about you. We just want to clear the air. Come tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. I'll make your favorite fried catfish and sweet corn. It was her mother's old recipe. She knew what that would do to me. All right, I said after a long silence. 7 it is. I hung up, leaned back in my chair, and let out a low laugh that didn't sound much like me. Dinner with knives, I muttered, when I told Odette she didn't like it. They're baiting you, she said. They want a scene. Don't go. Oh, I'm going, I said. But I'm not the one who's going to make a scene. The next night, Memphis air was thick with humidity, heavy enough to press down on your chest. I drove in slow, watching the city lights flicker against the windshield. When I pulled up to their house, I saw everything just as it had been: the perfect lawn, the same smug stillness that comes with money bought too fast. Brandon opened the door before I could knock a glass of wine already in his hand. Mr. Ellison, he said smoothly. Good to see you. Come in. The house smelled like lemon candles and deceit. Nia came out from the kitchen wearing a cream dress, her hair pinned back just like her mother used to do. For a split second, my heart softened, then I saw the stack of papers sitting neatly on the dining table. Dinner first, she said quickly, noticing my eyes. The food was perfect too, perfect. Golden catfish, mashed potatoes with gravy, and her mother's cornbread, the kind that used to crumble just right. I sat, let them pour my tea, and waited. Brandon talked about work, new projects, new clients. His voice smooth as honey poured over arsenic. Nia nodded at all the right moments, but she wasn't eating. Her fingers kept tapping the edge of the tablecloth. Finally, she said it. Pop after dinner, we just want you to take a look at something. Nothing serious, just a management agreement to help streamline the estate while probate clears. You'll still have full control, of course. Full control, I repeated. And this agreement, who drafted it? Brandon's firm, she said, forcing a smile. It's standard, totally revocable if you ever want to change it. I leaned forward, my voice low. You mean a durable power of attorney that can't be revoked once I sign it? The silence cut through the air like a blade.
Nia blinked, her mouth opening slightly. Pop, that's not. Brandon jumped in. Mr. Ellison, we're trying to make things easier for you. You've had a lot on your plate since your brother passed, and it's clear you've been under stress. Nia worries about you, especially after. He hesitated, letting his tone drop like a baited hook. After your wife's illness. Those were hard years, weren't they? Something in me snapped. Don't talk about my wife, I said quietly. I'm only saying, Brandon continued. Those last years were tough on you both. Losing her, moving out to the country, isolating yourself, it would take a toll on anyone. Emotional instability is nothing to be ashamed of. We just want to make sure you're protected. Protected. That word again. Always the same lie dressed in care. I set my fork down. The sound echoed like a gunshot against the porcelain. You know, Brandon, I said, keeping my voice level. You talk like a man who's rehearsed his lines, almost as if you've been reading from a script. His smile flickered. I don't know what you mean. Oh, I think you do, I said, turning to Nia. Tell me, sweetheart, did you rehearse yours too, or did Victor Hale feed them to you over the phone? Her eyes widened. What did you just say? I leaned back, folding my hands. I heard every word, Nia, the night you thought I was asleep in your guest room. The words, ex parte Monday, ring any bells? Her fork clattered to the table. Brandon's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. I know about the petition, I continued. I know about the lies, the so-called medical decline, the social isolation report. And I know you've been working with a private investigator to make me look unfit to handle my own life. Brandon stood, his voice rising. You had no right to eavesdrop on a private conversation in my house. And you had no right to conspire against your wife's father, I said, standing too. I may be old, but I'm not senile. You forget who you're dealing with, son. The mask cracked then, just a flicker, but enough. Brandon's polite veneer slipped, and the cold calculation underneath came crawling out. You're finished, old man, he hissed. You think anyone's going to believe a washed-up judge living on a chicken farm over your daughter and me? We've already filed the paperwork. By Wednesday, you'll be legally incompetent. The court will hand everything over. Nia turned on him, panic flashing in her eyes. Brandon, stop. But he didn't. He needs to hear it. You're done, Ellison. We're taking control before you ruin what's left of that inheritance. I stared at him, feeling the same kind of calm I used to feel when a witness finally confessed on the stand. The calm before the fall. Then I turned to Nia. Is this who you are now, the woman who trades her father for property, and a man like this? She looked away, tears starting to form. I didn't mean for it to go this far. Yes, you did, I said softly. You just didn't think I'd hear. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Brandon looked at her with disgust. Pull yourself together, he snapped. You're crying in front of him. He's manipulating you. Nia's shoulders shook. You don't know him like I do. No, Brandon said, his voice sharp as glass. I know exactly what he is, a man who used his courtroom power to control everyone around him. You think he's some noble relic? He's just an old judge who can't stand not being in charge anymore. I picked up my hat. You're half right, I said. I can't stand seeing snakes slither where family used to stand. I turned to leave, but Nia reached out, grabbing my sleeve. Pop, please. I looked at her hand, then at her eyes. If you wanted to help me, Nia, you'd have remembered what your mother taught you. Integrity isn't something you sign away for convenience. Brandon laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Integrity doesn't pay for a mortgage, old man.
No, I said, opening the door, but it pays for peace. I stepped out into the warm Memphis night, the cicadas screaming like tiny alarms. My chest was tight, but my head was clear. For the first time, I saw my daughter for what she was, torn between guilt and greed, a good heart strangled by ambition. As I reached my truck, I saw the glow of a phone screen through the dining room window. Brandon was typing something fast, his face lit by that cold blue light. He hit send. Minutes later, somewhere across town, a phone buzzed on a nightstand. A message appeared on Victor Hale's screen. Judge Mendez is assigned. He was your clerk once, right? Victor smiled to himself, misunderstanding everything. Because Rafael Mendez had never clerked for Brandon Hart. He'd clerked for me, and that single mistake would burn them both alive. The Shelby County Courthouse always smelled the same old paper coffee and nerves. When I walked in that morning, dressed in my plain brown coat and boots, still carrying the dust of Wolf River Road, every head turned. They saw what they wanted to see, a frail old man clutching a hat like a prayer. Let them. At the petitioner's table, Nia sat ramrod straight in her tailored navy suit, her lawyer whispering in her ear. Brandon was beside her, eyes cold, jaw tight, wearing that half-smile men get when they think the game's already won. The clerk's voice rang out. In the matter of Vance v. Vance petition for declaration of incapacity and establishment of conservatorship. The room shuffled to attention. Then the side door opened and Judge Rafael Mendez stepped in. The sound of his gavel was clean and hard, like the start of a duel. Court is now in session. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, silver in the hairlines cut deep from years of responsibility, but the same eyes steady and decent. He began reading from the file without glancing up. Petitioner alleges respondent demonstrates patterns consistent with diminished cognitive capacity and social withdrawal based on evidence compiled by a licensed investigator. That last part made Brandon smirk. Mendez continued, respondent present. I rose slow but sure. Yes, Your Honor. Jerome Ellison, respondent. The judge finally looked up and froze. For one breath, the entire courtroom felt suspended, the air thick as syrup. His mouth parted slightly. Recognition hit him like a current. Judge Ellison, he said under his breath. Sir, I nodded once. It's me, Raphael, but today I'm here as a citizen, not a judge, and with the court's permission, I'd like to represent myself. Gasps scattered across the benches. Brandon shifted uneasily. Nia's lawyer rose. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Given the nature of these proceedings, Mendez lifted a hand. It's unusual, counselor, but not irregular. The respondent has the right to appear pro se. He turned back to me, his voice gentler now. Granted. Thank you. Your Honor, I said, and took my seat. The lawyer cleared his throat, regaining his rhythm. Your Honor, the petitioner will demonstrate a consistent pattern of incapacity, the respondent's increasing social isolation, declining motor function, and recent erratic behavior. He signaled the bailiff, who dimmed the lights. On the projection screen flash photos, me on my porch with a coffee mug, me in my garden, me at the market alone. To them, it looked like loneliness. To me, it was peace. This series, the lawyer said, illustrates Mr. Ellison's reclusive habits. The investigator documented minimal social contact and noted tremors consistent with early neurological decline. When the lights came back on, Brandon looked satisfied. Nia avoided my eyes. Your Honor, I said quietly, standing. Permission to respond. Proceed, Mendez said. I'd like to begin by calling my first witness. The lawyer blinked. Already, yes. I believe in facts, not narratives. I turned toward the back row. Dr. Annika Rhodes, please. A woman in a pale blue jacket stood carrying a folder. Her voice was crisp, calm, the kind of voice juries listen to. Dr. Rhodes. I said, would you please state your credentials for the record? Neurologist, Memphis General Hospital. Board certified. I've treated the respondent for over 6 years. And what's my diagnosis? Essential tremor, she said. A benign hereditary condition that affects fine motor skills, but not cognitive function. Is it related to dementia, Alzheimer's, or any degenerative brain disease? No, she said firmly. There is no medical basis to claim that Mr. Ellison suffers from cognitive decline. His most recent cognitive assessment scored in the 97th percentile for his age group. I nodded. Thank you, doctor. No further questions. The lawyer tried to chip away stress, fatigue, depression, but Rhodes never blinked. Essential tremor, she repeated. Not confusion, not decline. By the time she stepped down, the gallery was whispering. Next witness, I said, Mrs. Pearl Watkins. A murmur rippled through the room as Pearl made her slow, determined way to the stand, bright yellow church dress, Bible in hand. She smiled at me as she raised her right hand to take the oath. Mrs. Watkins. I began softly, how long have you been my neighbor? 17 years, she said proudly. And in that time, have you observed any changes in my ability to care for myself? She gave a sharp laugh. Only that you mow your lawn straighter than mine. I see him every morning, she said, turning to the judge. He feeds his chickens, drives to town, pays bills at the credit union. He even fixed my porch light last month. Filled out the check himself, signed it right in front of me, neat as a school teacher. The lawyer rose, trying to regain control. Mrs. Watkins, you're fond of Mr. Ellison, aren't you? Course I am, she said. Doesn't make me blind. Makes me honest. Laughter rippled through the back of the courtroom. Even Mendez's mouth twitched. When she finished, I thanked her, and she touched my shoulder as she passed, gentle, steady. Then I turned to Odette, who sat by the wall, her tote bag resting at her feet. Ms. Price, I said, would you please bring the device? She rose, came forward, and set a small black recorder on the evidence table. Your Honor. I said this is a recording taken 1 week before this hearing. The voice you'll hear belongs to the petitioner, my daughter, Ms. Nia Vance Hart. The color drained from Nia's face. Pop don't, but Mendez had already nodded. Proceed. Odette pressed play. The room filled with Nia's voice, measured, professional, but unmistakable. Miss Price, I understand your loyalty to my father. But you have to see that this is for his own good. He's confused lately. If you could testify that you've noticed it, well, we can arrange a small stipend for your time. Cash, of course. A pause, then Odette's recorded reply, calm and cool. How much of a stipend we talkin', dear? Another pause. 50,000. Discreetly handled. No one has to know. Then the click. Silence rolled through the courtroom like thunder under glass. The gallery stopped breathing. Brandon went rigid. The young attorney beside Nia looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. Judge Mendez leaned forward, voice barely above a whisper. Ms. Hart, is that your voice? Nia didn't answer. Her chin trembled, her eyes wide with shock and shame. Your Honor, I said quietly, these are the facts today, the facts they asked for. And for the first time since the hearing began, even Brandon Hart couldn't find a single word to say. The courtroom had gone so still you could hear the faint buzz of the overhead fluorescents. Even the bailiff stood frozen mid-step. When Odette clicked off the recorder, Nia sat slumped, eyes wet, hands folded tight in her lap like a child caught lying. Brandon's jaw flexed hard, but he said nothing. His lawyer looked as though he wanted to evaporate. Judge Mendez exhaled slowly, then adjusted his glasses. Mr. Ellison, he said, voice low but steady. The court acknowledges the gravity of this evidence. Please continue. I nodded. Thank you. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit E, the River and Ridge documents. Odette handed over a neat binder, thick and color-tabbed. The clerk passed copies to the petitioner's table and to the bench. These, I began, are certified copies of wire transfers between River and Ridge, LLC CE Holdings, and a chain of shell corporations registered out of Arkansas and Tennessee. The dates align exactly with the period my brother Caleb's trust was amended 6 months before his death. Brandon shifted in his seat, his shoulders tightening. I flipped to the next tab, page 14, a transaction of $180,000 from R&R Developments to an account ending in 4921. The account belongs to one Brandon Hart. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Mendez banged his gavel. Order now. I continued, keeping my voice calm. This by itself might look like coincidence. But there's more. Emails recovered from Brandon Hart's firm, specifically from his business account, show communications with one Victor Hale, a private investigator engaged by the petitioner. I turned the screen of my laptop toward the bench, the text large enough for everyone to see, from Brandon Hart to Victor Hale. Subject re-conservatorship timeline. Fast-track the petition. We need that conservatorship order before the trust clause kicks in. Once we unlock it, we'll move funds quietly. No noise. The word unlock seemed to echo off the paneled walls. Your Honor, Nia's lawyer blurted, jumping to his feet. This is irrelevant to the question of Mr. Ellison's capacity. It's inflammatory and prejudicial. I met his eyes without flinching. Rule 401, Your Honor. Evidence is relevant if it has any tendency to make a fact of consequence more or less probable. These documents go to motive. The lawyer tried again. Rule 403. Then whatever probative value it has is substantially outweighed by unfair prejudice. I smiled faintly. Respectfully, Counselor, the truth isn't prejudice. It's exposure. A few people in the gallery whispered approval. Mendez tapped his pen against the folder, thinking. Overruled, he said finally. The court will admit the evidence under 401. I'll weigh 403 at my discretion. Brandon exhaled sharply, muttering something to his lawyer. Nia's face went gray. I stepped closer to the lectern.
Your Honor, these emails and transfers establish a pattern: financial manipulation, coercion, and concealment. This isn't about an old man losing his mind. It's about a son-in-law losing his soul. The sentence landed heavy in the room. Mendez studied the exhibits for a long moment. Then he took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and sighed. Mr. Ellison, I need to address something on the record. He looked directly at me. Given our prior professional relationship, I clerked under you for 2 years. I am considering whether recusal is necessary to avoid any appearance of bias. The gallery buzzed again. I shook my head gently. Your Honor, I trust your integrity. If you believe recusal's warranted, I'll respect it, but I don't doubt your fairness for a second. Mendez hesitated, then nodded. Very well. Here's what I'll do. I'm appointing a substitute judge, Judge Harlan Pierce, to review any procedural motions or final rulings. I'll remain to hear factual testimony only for the record. This ensures transparency. That was Mendez, precise, honorable, the same young man who once told me justice mattered more than comfort. He motioned to the bailiff, who exited to make the call. Proceed, Mr. Ellison, he said softly. I took a breath. There's one last matter. Odette handed me a small manila envelope. Exhibit F, I said, is a phone seized under preliminary preservation order after petitioner's counsel acknowledged potential data deletion concerns, spoliation risk as the rule calls it. This device belongs to Mr. Brandon Hart. The lawyer jolted upright. Objection. That phone was surrendered under protective review. The contents haven't been authenticated. Actually, I said, holding up a document, the chain of custody was signed this morning. The phone was placed under temporary court supervision for forensic extraction. Mendez nodded. He's correct. The motion was approved earlier today. The courtroom went deathly still as the bailiff approached, handing me the phone in a clear evidence bag. Its screen lit up mid-transfer, a notification flashing across it. One new message. The bailiff froze. Your Honor. Go ahead, Mendez said. The message preview glowed on the screen just long enough for everyone to read it.
Victor Hale witness taken care of back then. Gasps rippled through the room. Odette's hand flew to her mouth. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Mendez's expression hardened to stone. "Mr. Hart," he said slowly. "Care to explain what that means?" Brandon's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Naya stared at him, her face white as chalk. The silence that followed was colder than any gavel strike I'd ever heard. And I knew right then this wasn't just about stolen money anymore. Something darker was clawing its way out from under the paper trail. The hallway outside courtroom 3B was cold as a morgue. Marble floors, fluorescent hum, the faint echo of heels and whispers bouncing off the walls. That kind of silence that swallows every breath. I stood near the vending machine watching dust float in the shaft of morning light. Nia came out a few minutes later, her steps uneven, her face stripped of the courtroom mask. She looked smaller than she had at the petitioner's table, her hair slightly undone, the blue of her blazer too sharp against the tremor of her hands. "Pop," she said quietly, like the word itself hurt. I didn't answer right away. The air between us had years inside it, years of distance, arguments, missed birthdays, unspoken blame. I didn't know, she started. About the phone, about the money, Victor. Brandon said it was just to speed up the filings, that everything was clean. I studied her. "You really believe that?" she swallowed. "I wanted to. I needed to. You have no idea what it's like carrying debt a firm to run clients who treat you like furniture." Brandon, he made it sound like control was safety. Like if we didn't move fast, we'd lose everything. Her voice cracked on that word, everything. "What, everything?" Nia, I asked. "You've got a house bigger than the one I raised you in, a car that costs more than what I made in a year on the bench. What were you so scared of losing?" Her eyes met mine, glassy, desperate. "I was scared of being you." The words hung there sharp and naked. "I watched you struggle," she went on, her voice trembling. "Watched Mom sell her jewelry to pay medical bills. Watched you come home every night carrying other people's problems, but never enough money to fix our own. I loved you, but I hated watching you lose for being honest. I told myself I'd never live like that." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I said, "You thought being rich meant being safe. You thought money could armor you against the pain I carried. But all it did was turn you into someone you don't recognize." Tears slid down her cheek. "Pop, I'm so sorry. I thought you were fading, that you'd gotten soft, maybe even confused. I thought taking charge was protecting you." I shook my head slowly. "Love ain't a blank check, baby girl. It don't mean you get to rewrite a man's dignity in your handwriting." She took a step closer. For a second I thought she might reach for me, but she stopped. Her hands just hung there between us, trembling, empty. The elevator dinged at the end of the corridor. Brandon stormed out, his tie, loose eyes burning. "What the hell is this, Nia?" he hissed. "You're falling apart in there. You think crying's gonna save you? You better pull yourself together before Mendez hands this whole thing over to your father." Nia wiped her face and looked at him, and for the first time there was steel in her eyes. "Stop talking to me like I work for you." "Don't start this now," he snapped, grabbing her arm. "You stand tall or we lose everything." She jerked free so fast his hand barely brushed her sleeve. "I'm done lying, Brandon." His face twisted confusion, then rage. "You don't mean that." "Yes, I do," she said, voice shaking but firm. "I'm done." He stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. Then he turned that glare on me. "You did this," he said. "You turned her against me." "No," I said, calm as stone. "You did that yourself." He took a step forward, but before he could say another word, Odette came rushing down the hall, phone pressed to her ear, eyes wide. "Judge," she started, then caught herself. "Rome, you need to hear this." Mendez appeared behind her, having stepped out for a recess coffee. "What is it?" Odette ended the call, breathing hard. "That was the bank. The trust's holding account flagged an unauthorized wire attempt this morning, same signature pattern as the River and Ridge transfers. Someone tried to move $400,000 from Caleb's trust to one of Brandon's shell companies. The color drained from Brandon's face. That's absurd. I've been here all morning. Odette's eyes narrowed. Funny thing, digital signatures don't need you to leave the courtroom. Mendez stepped forward, his expression darkening to something colder than anger. Mr. Hart, he said, voice low and razor sharp. I'm ordering immediate seizure of all your firm's financial devices pending forensic review. Bailiff Brandon started to protest, but the bailiff was already moving. The judge turned to me, then to Nia. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes. Mr. Ellison, stay close. Ms. Hart. He hesitated, his tone softening just a little. You might want to decide which side of the truth you plan to stand on before this recess ends. He walked away. Nia stood frozen in that hallway, her mascara streaked her hands shaking. Brandon was being led off by the bailiff, still shouting about due process. I looked at my daughter, my only child, and for a moment I almost reached for her. But I didn't. Because forgiveness isn't a reflex. It's a boundary you build with tears and time, and she had just stepped over hers. When the court reconvened after recess, the air felt heavier, like the whole building knew something sacred was about to shift. The spectators whispered until the bailiff called for order. Then the substitute judge Harlan Pierce took the bench, a square-shouldered man with gray hair and eyes that didn't wander. Judge Mendez sat beside him in the observer's chair, no robe now, just the quiet dignity of a man who knew he'd already shaped the day's truth. Court is back in session, Pierce said, his voice low and deliberate. I've reviewed the filings, the exhibits, and the evidence presented before this recess. We will now issue findings of fact and conclusions of law. Brandon sat 2 seats away from Nia, his wrists stiff, his face a color somewhere between rage and fear. Nia's eyes were red, her hands folded in her lap, no longer pretending control. Pierce began reading, first on the issue of capacity. The court finds, by clear and convincing evidence, that Mr. Jerome Ellison possesses full mental competence and the ability to manage both his personal and financial affairs. The petition for conservatorship is hereby denied and dismissed with prejudice. There was a collective exhale from the gallery. Odette's hand brushed mine under the table, just a brief squeeze. Quiet, steady, proud. Pierce continued, his tone tightening. Second, regarding the secondary evidence entered during proceedings, specifically the River and Ridge financial documents and digital communications obtained under judicial order, the court finds sufficient indicia of potential fraud, forgery, and interference with fiduciary processes to warrant criminal investigation. Accordingly, all materials pertaining to Brandon Hart and his affiliated entities are referred to the Shelby County District Attorney's Office for immediate review. Brandon jerked up in his seat. That's ridiculous. You have no Pierce's gavel cracked like thunder, Mr. Hart. Sit down, or I'll hold you in contempt. You've had your say. Now live with your words. He turned his attention to Nia, his tone softening, but not much. As for Ms. Nia Hart, he said the court takes judicial notice of an attempted inducement of testimony through financial offer, as evidenced by a recorded statement entered into record. While the action does not rise to criminal bribery, it constitutes serious ethical misconduct. Therefore, this court refers the matter to the Tennessee State Bar for disciplinary review. Nia's head bowed. Her shoulders shook once, then went still. Lastly, Pierce said, looking at me, this court commends Mr. Ellison for his restraint and clarity throughout these proceedings. Justice is not only about punishment, it is about preservation of truth. And today, truth prevailed. He looked down, signed his ruling, and handed it to the clerk. The gavel struck once more. Case closed. But I wasn't ready to leave just yet. Your Honor, I said quietly, standing. May I address the court off record? Pierce hesitated, then nodded. Proceed, Mr. Ellison. I turned toward the gallery, toward Nia, toward the rows of faces that had watched a family bleed in public. I want to say something my brother Caleb would have said better, I began. He left me not just his estate, but a responsibility. He believed wealth without service is just vanity with a bank account. So today, I'm honoring his wish. Odette looked up, her eyes widening slightly. She already knew what was coming. I'll be activating the addendum of Caleb's trust. I continued. Effective immediately, the property he left in Collierville will become the Caleb Ellison Community Justice Annex, a free legal aid center for anyone who can't afford representation. For the next 18 months, as required in his conditions, I'll oversee it personally. After that, it'll become a self-sustaining nonprofit. A soft murmur rippled through the room. Even Judge Pierce looked momentarily moved. This center, I said, will be built not out of bitterness, but out of what my brother taught me, mercy with backbone, justice that listens before it strikes, and maybe, just maybe, it'll help another family before greed tears them apart. My voice faltered a little then, but I steadied it. That's how I intend to use what was almost stolen, not to punish, but to build. When I sat back down, you could have heard the hum of the courthouse lights again, the faint scrape of pen against transcript paper. Then Nia's voice broke the silence. Pop. She stood slowly, trembling. Pop, I want to be part of that, the center. I don't want money. I don't want anything. I just want to help. No pay. Just work. Her voice cracked raw and unguarded. Let me fix something for once. I looked at her a long time. The woman standing there wasn't the attorney who'd filed a petition to take my name away. She was the girl I used to teach to ride her bike down Cherry Street, knees, scraped eyes, full of courage and apology all at once. I didn't speak. I just nodded once, slow, deliberate. The judge adjourned the session. People started to leave, but in that one silent moment between the sound of the gavel and the shuffle of shoes, I saw something that looked like mercy being born in real time, and maybe for the first time in years, so did she. Spring came soft and slow over Memphis, the kind of season that doesn't announce itself with trumpet blooms, just creeps in through open windows and fresh paint. By April, the Caleb Ellison Community Justice Annex stood ready, whitewashed brick brass lettering gleaming above the double doors, sunlight catching the words like they meant something again. We opened on a Tuesday morning, not a grand ribbon-cutting, no speeches, no TV cameras, just a circle of people who'd earned the right to be there. Odette Price ran the show like a general in a lavender cardigan. She knew every volunteer by name, every client by face. The office already smelled like coffee, old paper, and hope. Judge Mendez stopped by once a week, sometimes twice, connecting us to the pro bono network, lining up young attorneys eager to earn more than billable hours. Pearl Watkins worked the front desk with a smile that could hush a storm. You come on in, baby, she'd tell every walk-in. Justice don't have no dress code. Dr. Annika Rhodes set up a small exam room in the back hall, a screening clinic she called it. Once a month she'd see seniors for free, checking their blood pressure, memory, and tremors, reminding them that getting older didn't mean being forgotten. And then there was Nia. She'd moved into a small apartment in Midtown, one-bedroom, second-floor windows that rattled when the trolley passed. She told me she liked the noise, said silence made her feel guilty. Every Thursday and Friday she showed up at the annex in jeans and a simple blouse, hair tied back, no makeup, no pretense. She didn't take a dime, just filed forms, counseled tenants fighting eviction, and stayed late helping grandmothers read through medical debt notices. She never said the words "I'm sorry" out loud. She didn't have to. I saw it in the way she carried files to the copier, in the quiet patience she showed when an old vet forgot his social security number for the third time. Redemption. I learned doesn't come with applause. It comes in slow, deliberate acts, quiet, humble, and earned one day at a time. Brandon, meanwhile, had his own path, or what was left of it. The grand jury came down hard. Wire fraud, false instruments, obstruction. I heard he'd traded his suits for county blues. There was talk he'd flip on Victor Hale, that private investigator with too many secrets and not enough conscience. But I didn't waste thought on him. The law would handle its own this time. The night of the annex's first community dinner, the place glowed with lights, soft and golden through the windows, laughter spilling onto the sidewalk. We had gospel from a local trio, paper plates full of catfish and baked beans, and kids running between tables like joy itself. When the crowd thinned, I slipped outside. Sat on the low brick step beneath the sign that bore my brother's name, Caleb Ellison. I traced the letters with my thumb the way you'd trace a gravestone, not from sorrow, but from pride. You did good. Brother, I whispered. We both did. I looked back through the glass. Nia was inside helping Pearl stack chairs. Odette was laughing at something Mendez said. The building pulsed with life, the kind of life Caleb always believed law was supposed to protect. I thought about everything we'd lost to get here, the years of silence between father and daughter, the nights I mistook solitude for peace, the courtroom where dignity almost died. I'd learned something in the wreckage: dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't need an audience or a verdict. It just stands quiet and steady when the noise fades. Respect may not buy cars, but it buys sleep. And that's a wealth no thief can steal. As I locked the front door that night, I left the porch light burning bright against the dark Memphis street. Always on. Because some doors once broken shouldn't be closed again. Not for those who walk back honest. Across the street in the shadows near a parked sedan, a camera lens clicked. Victor Hale lowered his phone, the glow of the screen lighting his face. He took one last photo of the annex sign, then dialed a number, a new contact saved simply as C. Morris, Nashville. Yeah, he said quietly. He's back in the game, and he's building something big. You'll want to see this. He hung up, slid behind the wheel, and disappeared into the Memphis night. A new storm gathering somewhere down the road. You know, people ask me if I regret anything, if I'd change the way I fought. And the truth is, no, I don't. Because sometimes justice isn't about winning, it's about standing when everyone expects you to fall. I lost time, I lost trust, but I kept my dignity. And that's something no court, no betrayal, no amount of money can ever take. If you're watching this, remember, family can wound you deeper than strangers, but forgiveness, real forgiveness, takes more strength than revenge. I'm Jerome Ellison, and if my story found its way to you tonight, tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because maybe, just maybe, you've walked through your own courtroom too and came out still standing. Take care of your heart, and keep your light on.